Yeah, hey everybody. Great to get started here this morning. Um, Basically, today's topic is really around data virtualization, leveraging Polybase, which is found in both SQL Server and Azure Synapse Analytics. Uh, it's an interesting topic to me. I've been doing this a little while. So I basically started my career around the Kennedy Space Center and evolved into technology over those years. And up there, I'm standing with the inventor of Hadoop, if you will. Um, and so I've actually holding the actual toy that it's named after. And it's been a SQL Server guy for quite a long time, consulting for as long as that has been around, and worked on lots of different data platforms. Enough about that. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the Azure journey, and I found this great street sign that's probably within just a few miles of our house. So I just thought, oh, this is awesome. There's a street named Azure. But the Azure journey is a lot of these things of kind of going through the phase of modernization, right? So we look at the way things have been in the past and how we do things, and those shortcomings and the benefits of those things, and try to get a blended sort of world for the future that takes from those two worlds and gives you more of a comprehensive answer of what you're after for the future. So we see that in lots of ways, right? So redesign for the cloud usually means consideration of things like high availability, for example. A lot of smaller and medium-sized businesses knew they kind of needed to do this stuff, but maybe they didn't have the budget or the time or the energy to do it. The people sometimes, it's all these things. It doesn't always get done well in that way. And in Azure, it's trivial. It's trivial to get a high-performing, highly available system without a lot of effort and undue expense. So there's that aspect. The adoption of new technologies like microservices architectures and advanced analytics. These are all great things. AI and ML. Um, there are lots of really great ideas here that you can bring to bear on your business and give you a benefit of modern technology approaches to old problems. So there's just a lot to this, as you probably know. So usually in the steps to do this, you end up doing this wholesale sort of assessment, right? You're trying to understand, what do I have today and how's it working? And then you go through this planning phase, and eventually you hopefully find yourself in a migration where you say, all right, well, let's try to see how this might work and test that migration strategy, and maybe more than one strategy depending on what you're dealing with. And then do cut over and whatnot. I'm bringing all these things up today in the context of data estate modernization because this is just one more of these techniques that maybe today you're not using, right? You're not using it because you might be on older platforms, you might be stuck on older versions of, like for example, SQL Server that doesn't have Polybase, where you can't do virtualization, which we'll kind of get into some of that. I bring up this slide here because this is the real Microsoft way of looking at the world on the advanced analytics side, what we call the modern data warehouse, right? So data movement, from left to right, we've got all these different data sources. If you're in business any length of time, you've got everything from SQL Server to MySQL to Postgres to mainframes to whatever on that left side. All those things are data feeds. And there might even be things like PDF documents. Let's say you're in construction and you've got all of these forms that you have to fill out, for permits and surveys and all these things that you have in your business. All those things get digitized, saved as a PDF at some point, and now you've got this mountain of documents. Well, this can bring order to that chaos. Same thing with images, and same thing with video, and all these things. And so on the left side, you've got the data sources. You go into this gather phase where we bring together the bits to extract that data, bring it into a pipeline, and push it over into something like Azure Data Lake Store, which I think of as kind of the heart of our modern data warehouse. And then, we also have another phase up there. If you look at the top, you see the store phase where we've got this Azure SQL database symbol where we might be storing it there instead of SQL Server, or we might be going down to our Cosmos DB because it's more of a fit for key value pair sort of problems. Cosmos is a fantastic engine. It's extremely fast, and there's a lot to that story to unwrap, but we won't go into that. But Synapse Analytics is a great tool, and we're going to look a little bit about a little piece of Synapse today. It's got its legacy in the MPP world of Microsoft PDW, and which was a big physical washing machine, or actually refrigerator, depending on how big you bought it, appliance. It's a physical appliance, a set of racks, a set of servers in a rack. And that's the way PDW was, Parallel Data Warehouse, which begat APS, Advanced Platform System, or something like that. I forget what that one stands for. But they were all MPP, and I won't go into that. Those of you know what that is, it's easy, it's nothing. But the Synapse portion of that is a very important thing, because first we had Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which was an MPP in the cloud, the first ever for anybody, and then turned around and expanded that idea to Synapse, which is a workspace that's capable of not only talking to the big cluster, the MPP cluster we're talking about, but also it's a tie point for Azure ML and for Power BI and lots of things. So it's a great one-stop shopping sort of place to have a team working effectively together. So it's a great thing. And then Databricks is kind of that red symbol in the middle there. That's a Spark solution. We'll talk a little bit about it, but we won't get into deep into Spark as a technology because our focus today is more on the virtualization side. So as you see, ML, cognitive services, all those things in the model phase, and we go into analysis. Some folks love analysis services. I'm one of them. I don't have the roots that some of my coworkers do, and this is more in their space. But it's a great way to provide that sort of semantic layer to the business, where you want to just give them a place that has all the data that they care about, cleaned and stored and sorted and vetted and verified, all these things, and then all they have to do is build reports that go against that. And on the share side, obviously, we have Power BI, and then we also still do a lot with Excel and things like even SharePoint. So that's kind of the big picture of what you can see as the sort of Microsoft view of the data state, if that helps. And so, like I mentioned, these are some of the legacy environments that I've seen, where we have, 2 data centers filled with equipment. One is for cutover and failover and emergencies. The other one is what we think of as production. Some shops, they run for a period of time on both, so that they make sure they both work, and which is really smart. But this kind of gives you a sense of just how complicated and how big those things can be, and how many applications. And this is just a handful of the things. There isn't even custom applications or things like that. So the part about that modern data warehouse, it's a well-known architecture. It's very flexible, it's consistent, it's stable. Thousands of companies have employed that successfully. It's been a huge win for Microsoft and for our customers. When we get into the sort of the information management styles, we're going from a top-down approach of data warehouses of days of yore to the bottom-up approach of using data lake, and whatnot. So the top-down approach is we get this theory, we do the hypothesis, the observation, confirmation, and then you'll notice on the next little area we're starting to do descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics. What happened and when? Why did it happen? And then you see the difficulty starts rising, along with it. What will happen? So we're in predictive analytics and then ultimately prescriptive analytics. So it starts to become this sort of picture. Whereas the bottom up is the opposite, right? So we start with observations and patterns and hypothesis and then theory. I have done both, and I kind of favor that right-hand panel because you don't come into it with a sort of an assumption of what's going on. You tend to come at it with more of an open scientific view of how it might go. All right. So as we go through here, it's the same thing. Basically, this is the old style. We gathered requirements. We did all the hard front-end work, and then we go and implement this thing, and hopefully other people would use it. And a lot of times they may or may not have, depending on how successful your implementation went. And the bottom-up approach from data lake perspective is exactly as you might guess. We just take all of the data and land it in data lake and then go to consume it from that point. So, and then we do all the analysis on top of that Hadoop style. Moving on. The data types in these worlds are the biggest thing of it. In the old days, it was all structured data. We got data feeds from a mainframe, or we got data feeds from external data sources, or we might just do an extract from our ERP system into a set of CSV files, things like that. Kind of that has been the way it's been historically, but in the new world, it's all those things that I mentioned. The unstructured data like audio and video and images, all kinds of stuff. And we have the tools in this new world that we didn't have in the old days too. And that's hugely important to recognize. And the part that I find really telling is that we don't have to do a lot of work to get there. We don't have to build things from scratch to get the benefit here. It's already done for us in Azure. It's easy to work with, and it's easy to understand and learn. So, right. So we get into data virtualization of itself. This is kind of the final step, or I think of towards this modernization, near towards the end, where we've gone from physical machines to virtual machines. Now containers are the rage, and now data virtualization is in there as well. And what we've seen is this pattern that we stopped dealing with such a physical world in favor of a virtual one. Because of cost, or because it didn't meet things like SLAs, or it didn't meet cutover or whatever. And the world has gotten better with these things. I have to admit, when I first saw virtualization on physical machines, I thought, I don't think I like this idea. It took me a while, I have to admit. But when containers came along, which is the step up from that, I was all in. I thought, oh, this is awesome. Now we don't have all the limitations that we had with virtual machines. We're not trying to go from a complete sort of ordered piece that comes from a physical copy. I really think so. As we've gone forward, it's gotten more and more virtual. So with data, we used to just export it and then import it and test it and deliver it. And these days with data virtualization, we can just point to it. And that's a huge thing to understand because for one, I'm not convinced that a lot of people are taking advantage of this like they should be when I look at it. So it has its benefits, good and bad, right? So the good is we don't move the data, it stays right where it is. We just provide a layer over the top of it, use that abstraction layer to view the data. and then we just use it wherever it happens to live. It can have a performance hit doing that. It isn't always great. Availability is another thing. I mean, because you're doing that, you're not really doing anything than leveraging what's there. So if it's highly available, that's great. And if it's not, that's not so great. And then security can become an interesting problem as well. So there are trade-offs here. And what we usually do in this case is look at the good and the bad and weigh those things out and try to understand the benefit. On par, data virtualization is a huge win because all the things I mentioned, not moving it, not having to do that. And if all your other aspects of this, like performance and availability and security, are correct to begin with, you won't have any problem with it being in place and not realizing things. So Polybase is an interesting piece of technology for lots of reasons for me, because it's been around quite a long time. You know, Microsoft announced Parallel Data Warehouse at, I believe it was our annual event at the past summit, and I believe in that year it was in Seattle in 2011. And at that unveiling of the PDW came David DeWitt, who you see in this picture over here, Dr. David DeWitt. Great guy. Got to meet him. Terribly bright, insightful guy. I used to teach at the University of Madison, not far from my home in Minneapolis at that time. Just a really engaging, smart guy. He's actually the guy where, if you ever run across it, is named after the DeWitt clause about monitoring computer performance and publishing results and all that. It's all named after him. So you can look that up on your own. But he was a principal, and the reason that's important is that David is a brilliant guy. I've just found it interesting that he was part of that early story. In any case, we got Polybase added to SQL Server at the enterprise level in 2016. So that meant we could start doing data virtualization right inside SQL Server. And it was a big win. At that particular time, I was interested in data virtualization in another area as well, which was using Hadoop particularly, and Hive expressly, because Hive can do this as well, and lots of other database engines can as well. So the idea of data virtualization isn't unique to SQL Server. It's just well done in SQL Server, I think, but it's also done even better in our friend Synapse Analytics. Also, if you're a huge SQL Server fan, you're going to run across folks like Buck Woody, who's just he's a complete animal when it comes to this big data cluster idea. You know, for a while back, we got the benefit of having Linux and Windows containers and using Kubernetes, and there became these notions inside of Polybase and SQL Server of using a big, a cluster to handle large operations and also availability. When they containerized SQL Server and made that available in Linux, then this really got to be wild. Now you've got some real power behind it to be able to do that, because now you can have literally hundreds of machines working together as a unit. So it's just a phenomenal thing. So Bob Ward is another guy. I mean, he's like the granddaddy of SQL Server, but Buck is there with him, and usually they present together. So if you ever get a chance, go see these guys. They'll tell you all about everything you want to know about big data clusters and whatnot in Linux. The Linux experience for SQL Server is unremarkably very close to what we normally see through things like SQL Server Management Studio. You can't tell the difference, which one's which. But I do think it runs extremely well in Linux. I'm very pleased with that. So it turns out to be a huge win. As I mentioned, predominantly it's going to be a SQL Server and Synapse Analytics proposition when it comes to Polybase. And of course, I always get that, but what about stuff? And I'll go into that in a minute. Let's close off from here. Let's go take a look at a couple of demos to let you see what's what out here. So I've got my Azure subscription sitting out here, and I'm hoping everybody can see that. Crystal, if that's not the case, please let me know. I think we're still doing okay. So, yep, all right. So if I go into Synapse Analytics at this point, this is the workspace itself. Let me pull this up. And when we provision these things, when you go to create the workspace itself, or you create a new non-dedicated pool, dedicated pool, and Apache Spark pool, all these things are done here within the portal, or can be done here. It can be done other ways as well. I know you can do it with PowerShell and other things, but for now, you can just take a look at this if you've never created one, and you can see as we go down through here all the different choices we've got here about encryption, networking, identity, private endpoints. It's very secure, very usable. We're going to open this workspace, give you some sense of what's out here. And when you get in here, of course, you see, here are all the things that I mentioned earlier where we're tying together, ingestion, using a lot of what we've learned through Azure Data Factory. They look very similar. I swear that it's probably the same code, but I wouldn't promise that. And then we can do the analysis from in here and then visualize it as well, as this is alluding to. So we've come down, we're at the sort of home place here. If we go into this sort of data container, you can see we have two serverless databases running out here. This is the one I think I created originally. When I created the workspace, you get one, it automatically creates one. And then I just created another one for fun, just to redeploy everything. The thing to know about serverless and Synapse Analytics is it doesn't come with any storage. There's no storage, or I should say that there has to be a little somewhere, but for the intent and purpose of where pool is a sort of synonymous with database, if you're that of that world, there's no storage behind it for that purpose. There's a little bits and pieces for the workspace and whatnot, but so what that means to you is you can't really create a table. Like if I went into this one and I said, oh, I want to create a table in this Argon S serverless pool. Why don't I just go do that? Well, you can't do that, and that's why you don't see any nodes in here, because there's no storage, right? So the best you can do is actually go and create the artifacts and then query them directly. So we'll kind of bring up a little demo that I've created, right? So what I've done is I've taken the New York City 2018 Central Park squirrel census. So in Central Park, they decided they wanted to know how many squirrels are in Central Park at one point, and they counted them, and I'm not kidding a bit. The great thing about the city of New York too is they provide a lot of their data as open source. So you can literally download things like the squirrel data and have at it. And so I did, and so did a lot of people. I found this right after it came in, and now I've found a lot of people are out looking at it and using it for things. When you roll down the page a little bit, it starts to give you an idea of what it might look like, the columns that are in here, plus a little snapshot of what the data might look like. I find that helpful. So I created this little demo, and the first thing we have to do is create this sort of master key. I'm just going to copy this whole thing and drag it over just to make it easy for us to talk, make it easy for me to coordinate. So we go through in this area. We can just go ahead and see, let's see here. I can bring up this table here. Now what this is an external table, meaning it's just a definition. And if we look in here, we have to have a few things to do that, right? We had to have the encrypted key. We have to have a database scope credential. And what that is with this one, it's a shared access signature. So if you've worked with Azure Storage before, which we can go right in here, this is Azure Storage as seen through Azure, Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, which you can see up here. I'm looking at the storage directly, and I can go through and see, oh, okay, here's the storage account. Here are the blob containers. Here's where I normally keep my data for fun in this demo. Here's the squirrel census itself. And here's the CSV file that we got from the city of New York. Now, all I had to do to put that there is simply I can look here on the menu system here, and you can see you can upload, download, all these things up here. We'll just download this one for fun, and we'll just choose the downloads folder just because we can, and it will bring us the CSV that was that I uploaded earlier today. And now once it's here, we can go out to my downloads folder and go over here, and then we'll go to where'd it go here? Pull this up in Excel because it's automatically the weapon of choice for CSV for Microsoft. And you can see what's in here. We've got a column called X and Y and unique squirrel ID and things like that. So this is CSV of the data. Great, you know. So that is what that file looks like. So we come back up in here. So when we get this, what we're doing over here, back in the Synapse world, is we're creating this external table. And as we get down in here, there's the data source here that we need. By the way, these are all in GitHub, which I'm going to share. You're welcome to go create these yourselves. So we get an external file format, right? So we have to tell it, okay, what is the file? How is it formatted? This isn't the only format style. There's quite a few. I'm just setting one up for delimited text. You'll see a lot of articles along this. I remember which one this one came from, but you can find those. But also Parquet, and we're going to talk a lot about Parquet in a little bit. There's also Delta for you Delta Lake fans. We can actually do it straight in through here. So if it looks a lot like T-SQL, it's because it pretty much is. I mean, I'm using the standard command to go and create this thing from scratch, and then creating this external table. Well, you'll notice, you know, when I look at this, a lot of times when I first try to deal with data I've never worked with before, I will just set it to a var chart. I'm not gonna try to sort this out the minute I get my hands on it. Just, you know, there'll be data quality problems. I'll find, you know, in a date field, I'll find somebody's put, you know, ABC or things like that. So, you know, that'll obviously throw an error on an import. So I just declare everything as a var chart and pull it in that way. And there's a with clause that if you're, you know, a T-SQL fan, that tells it where to look for the file and what the data source is, which we previously described, and what format to use, which we also previously described, as you'll see in this, if you download this little script. And then you can go and test the squirrel census table itself, just to be sure, keep me honest here. So we can go in here, let's see here, hold on. And then we can run this little script right straight in here. And you can see we've got all that squirrel data just right there for people that love squirrels. And so one thing, so that's the easy part, right? So now we've got this table, it's a CSV, we've pointed to it, we've described it, but we didn't really get in any details, right? So we didn't do any scrubbing or cleaning or anything. We just took it as is. That's fine. Sometimes that's all we want to do. We just want to explore the data. We don't want to get down in the weeds and do anything else with it. All we want to do is get it where we can look at it. But so like a lot of times what I want to do is I want to go a little further than that. Maybe what I want to do is do not only convert this to, say, a Parquet file of that type, but also I want to do some cleanup. Like here, I can cast these data types to their proper things. Like this is a decimal 18.6 for the longitude and latitude. And then the same thing, squirrel ID, bring all these things into a normal sort of proper data type. You'll see all the data fiddling I'm doing here to bring the date into a format that it's a string format now, but I want to convert it to a string format that would represent a date, and then cast that whole thing as a date. So there's a little bit of code to do that. And then the same thing here as we go, we're starting to play around and get this down to the minimum sizes that we would need to make this work. And then so as we get done with that, we can then do this, of course, the same thing as we just did for the other table. So the part that I might have glossed over is that this is creating a brand new table off the data. So it's taking the data that we had from before and in the virtualized table, right? Which is what this select is. And it creates a brand new table as. So it's we think of as a CTAS, C-E-T-A-S, create an external table as select. We can get that mouthful going there. So what it's doing is it pulls it in, and what I did was when I did this, I also changed the format over to Parquet, which I find to be a much better format for utility use. Not all tools support that yet, not even Excel directly, but that is the future. We're going to see less and less like CSV format. Comma separated values is what that stands for if you don't know. And we're going to see more and more people adopting Parquet as sort of the de facto sneaker net thing that you slip down, into and some work stream and use it that way, because it has a lot more benefits and a lot better features than the older stuff. Anyway, so we go back to our original area here, and then this is the new Parquet version of the thing, right? You'll notice when we pull down here, it has literal data types. I mean, these are actual SQL data types that we all know and understand if you're a T-SQL guru. So this is kind of very handy too, because now not only is it in the right formats and we know the data types, but the cool thing is it's compressed. We're using snappy compression. There's many codecs that we use in open source. Snappy is one of them. Probably my favorite for lots of reasons. It's splittable, and we'll forget about that for a moment. But anyway, you see how quick it is. It's a very fast format. It's a columnar format for one. If you don't know what that means, you can research that. But it's a columnar format. It's self-describing because the metadata is within the envelope, right? So it knows what the column names are. And so we don't have this thing of having the very first row, if you will, dedicated to the description of what the column names are. We have a metadata portion of that file that knows that same layout information, if that works. So having said all that, you get this this idea of data virtualization because these are external tables. There's no storage inside of this serverless pool. Never will be. It's just enough to store things like this table definition, a store procedure definition, a function definition, a view. You can do those things, but you can't have a physical table being stored here. And so that's the limitation. So I use this all the time, and I find it extremely useful for lots of reasons. Notwithstanding, but like if I want to with Power BI, there's a couple choices I have. Like I could download the squirrel file that I just did, and I could actually use Power BI to go after it, and it'd be just fine. But I can also use it to talk to Synapse Analytics. Aha! Now we're cooking with gas here. So let's just do get external data for a second. So we're going to go and tell it, we're going to tell a little white lie here. We're going to say, we're going to deal with Azure, and we'll just say it's Azure SQL Database, which it's not, but we'll just know that. So I've got to tell it what server I'm going to go get, right? So the server I'm going to go get, the fast way to get the answers, at least part of the answers, is you'll see right here, we've got a bunch of endpoints. The serverless endpoint happens to be this one. And that's going to be what we're going to use to say, here's your server. And then the database one itself, we can do the Argon S one if we want to. Either one, I think I've got it in both. And then under the advanced options, you can see other choices you could be making that we don't need to do any of that. Now it's going to want to know some credential information, if I remember right. Nope, I already did last night. That's why I didn't ask it, but it will. It's a usual dialogue if you've run into that before. So here is the 2018 version, right? And you can right off the bat see how fast that is, and you can see the data types and everything. So we're going to go with this one because for time, and we'll go ahead and choose that one. I could go through the normal steps of the transform, right? So what if I had not bothered with messing around trying to get the year, month, and day worked out to an actual citing date column? You could be doing this, in Power Query instead, but not everybody wants to do that. So in fact, I tend to do most of these kind of transforms as early as I can before Power BI even gets its hands on it, because it just makes sense. I've got all the weapons. I've got stuff Power BI and others wish they had. They've got Power Query, which is a phenomenal tool, but I might be using programming languages to solve some of these things. So might be a better choice. You never know. All right, so now it's going to go pull the data from the squirrels out there. And I'm talking straight to the serverless here doing this. All right, so now if I go in here, you can see I've got my squirrels table loaded in here. And if I go to the surface over here, I could literally take, I like this map thing that Microsoft gave us. There's another one from ArcGIS that's down here. I just don't have a license for it, so yeah. So as you saw, I did a Latin long sort of connection change. Let's do that for fun. Let's take this latitude field, drag it over, drag the longitude field over, and guess what? What does that look like? It looks like Central Park in New York City. Well, that was fast. So then you can start having fun, like, you could start wondering, okay, well, on the legend, I could figure out exactly, do some filtering based on what kind of squirrels, the adults or juveniles and those kinds of things, which I can show you real quick. One of them, we'll just do the age one for fun and see. If I drag that to the legend, I could do it that way. I could also use just another control to do it. But you can see the distribution of old squirrels and younger juvenile squirrels. The blue ones, I believe, are unknown. It's like they didn't bother to record it, whoever was doing this. But you can see how adults figure in. And you can do things like counts, like, right, if you're a Power BI head, and I kind of love me some Power BI, to be honest. Can't can't not love Power BI. At least I can't. Let's see. Where is my squirrel ID? I have a squirrel ID. Here it is. Let's do a count of these, like not what I'm after. Not sure what the squirrel ID is. Let's see here. I don't want the first. Give me a count of the distinct number of squirrels, please. Thank you. So those are all the squirrels. Now, when I start filtering and say, I just want to see the young ones, I can get these two things to play together. And so now I've got one selected, but there are other ways where you can get the whole count. But now we're back to 3018 or something. In any event, so that's soup to nuts. That's kind of how you can use data virtualization to replace the idea of, oh, the only thing I can do is pull this into a table first. Well, no, you don't. You can do all your exploration with Synapse Analytics Workspace and a serverless pool, and then use things like, our friends, helper tools like Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, for example. Or you could go straight into the portal itself and use the Storage Explorer that is built into this. So you can do it that way as well. All right, we're kind of coming up on time pretty soon. Do we have any questions from anybody at this point?
I don't see any on here.
Give everybody just a minute and see if I bored everybody. You're all quiet and asleep. All right, well, that's all I had, Crystal.
All righty. Thank you, Roland. I greatly appreciate it. It looks like, yeah, there's no questions. I do just want to tell everybody, if you guys have any questions or think of anything, please feel free to reach out to Roland or myself. You guys will receive this in your email box tomorrow around 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If anyone, like I said before, have any questions, please feel free to reach out and follow us on our social media channels at Go3Cloud or at 3Cloud. We are always sharing new information, when our next webinars are, new offerings. So please feel free to follow us on all of our social media channels that will also be linked in the email. Roland, I do see one question that just came in. It says, in order to refresh a Power BI report based on CTAS tables, Synapse needs to be up and running, I presume? Question mark.
That's correct. It does. And it can be, if it's the first time you light that up that day, it could be slow. And maybe even time out, depending on how slow. So yeah, that is a thing you'll have to take into account. Having it spun up and working, you mean, because I was using it earlier, it was up and running. Good point.
There's another question that says, and impression about the cost.
I didn't quite understand that. You mean about cost?
Yeah, I think it's a continuation of his first question, I believe. Your name is Jaco. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. If you can clarify what you mean by that.
See if I can play along at home here. Oh, okay. Yep. So based on a CTA, yeah, I see that one. Thank you. Impression about the cost. Okay, great. That's a great question. So you're going to have a little bit of cost. Azure Data Lake Store is really cheap stuff. It is fantastic storage and it's extremely cheap. So I would use the Azure Price Estimator to do this. And because you're using serverless, you're paying by the drink, right? So in the time that I've used it, the last, I don't know, year or something, I have noticed the cost to be so small, they're not hardly worth talking about. Now, that could be because I use a lot of little workloads like you just saw. Under your conditions, your mileage may vary. So I would say do this. Set it up in dev, do a partial test. So if you've got something really big you want to try, and see what the costs come out to. And you can tell right away, pretty much, within that day or less, what the cost for a run was, for example. It'll give you some sense of, are we talking, tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars? And there are places along all those continuum that make sense, right? Even the thousands of dollars, because you might, remember that we're renting an MPP device in the cloud, which is huge. So these devices consist of up to, traditionally they've been up to 60, I think, distributions is the way this one works out. I know they're not entirely physical, but anyway, I won't get into all that. But just try it in a small way as a sample test, and that'll give you a good idea along with the cost estimator. If you go to the Azure cost estimator, it'll give you a pretty good idea.
I think there's a couple more questions that came in. It says, I just want to confirm that CDAS is a Polybase function. How does Polybase, can't see the rest of your question.
Oh, as to linked servers in SQL Server, they're not alike, really. They're both, I guess they are alike in the sense that they're both technologies to query data, but linked servers come at, I believe, a different place in the SQL Server world as far as the engine, where Polybase is an external engine, I think. I believe that linked servers per se are in the same memory space and compute space that SQL Server runs, which is why a lot of us former DBAs hate that stuff. So I would look at it as a very different sort of approach architecturally. I'm not an expert in that area. You'd have to do some research on your own, but I know that the Polybase engine is a separate thing, whereas linked servers, I think, are completely internal. Hope that helps. Yes, the scripts are easy to set up at GitHub. You're welcome, Jacob. Hope it helped you a lot. I will go out and make sure. A lot of times I will keep those GitHub resources locked down a little bit. But in this case, I'll make sure it's public for you. Just give me about 5 minutes. So then download the scripts, run them yourself. What you would have to do would be go into your Azure subscription and set up Synapse Analytics workspace. It will automatically create a serverless pool for you during that creation process. But my experience so far on the Synapse workspace is it's very cheap. It's definitely worth the price you pay. So use that to get started. It's a phenomenal piece of technology. You guys will love it. All right. By the way, the link to GitHub should be in the presentation in the back page. So I'll run out there and make sure that it's open to you. Anything else?
That looks like everything.
All right.
All right. Like I was saying before, thank you, Roland, so much for hosting. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Like I said before, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Roland or myself. As I also stated, this will be in your email box. You guys will receive the recording around noon Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. If you guys would like to stay up on all things 3Cloud with our webinars, blogs, our offerings, please feel free to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Go3Cloud or LinkedIn and YouTube at 3Cloud. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope you all have a good rest of your Tuesday. Roland, again, thanks for hosting. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.